Hello and welcome to the opening session of ETCFO Leadership Summit. I'm really glad to have with me the man with many ideas, the leader, entrepreneur, a successful businessman, and more importantly, a philanthropist. He has working on many projects like clean energy, and his aim is to create, produce, and distribute useful devices and solutions that serve the poorest third of the world. He is the founder of Fire Energy, Billions in Change, Stage 2 Innovations, Hunts Power and Water, and founder of Shwansh Farming. He is none other than Manoj Bhargava. Mr. Bhargav, we are pleased to have you.
Thank you.
So, to begin with, Mr. Bhargav, since we have this ETCFO Leadership Summit, which is the second edition of the Economic Times CFO News Portal, don't want to ask you how you started, because there are many people who actually follow you and they have actually learned how you started, how your journey is. But my question to you, sir, is how did you continue to be a leader consistently?
I don't really consider myself a leader. I look at projects and say, what should I do? What's the most important thing I can do? What's the most useful thing I can do? And I just do that. To me, leadership is different than for most people. I mean, I know you have courses and people teach leadership and all this stuff. For me, it's really pretty simple. When you're dealing with someone across the table from you, think from their point of view, not yours. Okay? Because in that room, then, your point of view is irrelevant. The only point of view that matters is the other person's point of view. The second part to me in leadership is do what you say and say what you do. In other words, the rules should apply to you as well. I tell people if your boss steals pencils, everybody knows it's okay to steal. If you treat outside people and you cheat them, everybody in the company knows that it's okay to cheat. Mm-hmm. So leadership is just, in the US, it was saying, it's walking the talk. It's what you're saying, you're doing. That's it. That's the only thing I know about leadership. Other than that, I have no clue.
Sounds a very honest and an instinct answer, sir. But let me learn some more anecdotes from you. And if you could add and give me some more examples of how to be a successful leader, because your journey has been really inspiring. So, what makes a successful leader? I mean, the business values that he creates, or his philanthropy initiatives like managing finance or social projects. I mean, how do you view it?
Well, in the business side, the biggest issue is pick the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. In other words, if you do something really well, but it's not the right thing, or it's a marginal thing, it doesn't really matter. Okay. So most of my time is spending is looking at things and saying, what is the right thing? What is the right project to pursue in the first place? I see this in corporate America or in corporate world everywhere, is they've got hundreds of projects. And you look at them and you say, half of them, why are you doing them? So it's not about doing those projects well, it's like getting rid of them. And then looking at, I used to tell people, and people think I work many, many hours, long hours. I said, I don't really. A chief executive's time in a year, maybe he decides 6 things to do, and maybe about 40 or 50 things not to do. Other than that, what are you doing? So if that takes more than 40 hours, you're doing something wrong. So to me on that side of it is start concentrating on what's useful. I told somebody I sat on a board for a very short time. I don't sit on boards, but I told that chief executive of a large hospital chain, I said, look, get a stamp that says useless on it, right? Everything that comes across your desk that doesn't do something that's really useful and goes towards either making money, saving money, serving the customer, those kinds of things. It's not doing that. Mm-hmm. Stamp it useless and have them never bring it to you again. Right? So it's a really simple approach, which is probably 90% of all you really need. Now, I don't have an MBA, so I can't speak MBA speak, but maybe the 5-10% needs to be the MBA stuff. But most of it is fundamental. It has nothing to do with what they teach you.
Very interesting and meaningful. In fact, if I could share my experience, the CEOs and the leaders, those who have not done MBAs have shared great experiences than the CEOs who have done MBAs or typical of masters and finance degree. Moving ahead, sir, I would like you to, tell us more about the CSR and other activities. So in India, the corporate social responsibility is mandatory for the listed and profitable entities.
Sure.
If I ask you specifically, how CFOs or the financial leaders should make most of it? How should they involve in such activities?
Right. It's the same thing. Look, there are two parts of CSR.
Mm-hmm.
One is you have to do it, so you throw money at stuff that is irrelevant, but some relative wants to do it or somebody else, some agenda,
Mm-hmm.
which is like, if you give us this, we'll give you that. There's that level of CSR, which is all nonsense, right? And then the other part is really simple, is choose the projects well. In other words, what do you think makes the most difference?
Okay.
There are people across India that have, it just took us years and years, because at one point we were giving away, hundreds of millions and not making a whole lot of difference. A third of it, I think, was stolen. 2/3 of it was good, but it was like throwing sand in the river. It really, in the end, it didn't really make much difference. Now, we have hospitals, we build schools, and we do all of that stuff. But what I would recommend is really choose the project carefully so that it has the most impact and a longer term impact. I know sustainability is a big word, but really in the end, I don't prescribe to all these fancy words because they get you lost. But it's something that goes on for a long time. For example, what we did in the end was say, look, there are only a few things that are important. The most important thing for any person, poor or not poor, is, can I make a living?
Okay.
That's above all things, right? So anything that aids in that is more useful than anything else, right? For example, so what we did was say, look, most everybody's a farmer in India, right? 3/4. So we came up with a way they can make their own fertilizer for free. And their wages, we're probably in about 60,000 farms now, and it'll grow. But the farmer's wage went from 2% of what he sells to 22%, because most of his money, 25% of his money, was going to fertilizer. So now he's actually making a living, right?
Okay.
So it's looking at projects and saying, does this make a substantial difference? Now, anything that helps a human being that's suffering is good. And if it's not helping that, and you just want fashion show, which most of corporate goes with the fashion show, whatever thing, diversity and blah, blah. Look, diversity is great, but starving is worse. Okay, so you say, okay, well, but today, what we find is most corporate guys want to do those things which are popular in the West, so that they're perceived by their friends and relatives and peers saying, "Oh, you're doing sustainability." That's a bunch of politics. So I don't know politics, so I would not be an expert in that area. If you're going to do that for the look of it, how the company looks, I don't know anything about that. But if you want to do something substantial, that's what we're talking about.
Moving ahead, because you also mentioned about sustainability, and I obviously had that question as a center point of our discussion. When I look at sustainability, green finance, climate change, they are not just important for environment, but that also has a huge impact on each and every business. Ultimately, the businesses will go and become outdated if the climate is not being managed really well. So if I look at these important issues, many developed countries are at least looking at it a bit seriously. Maybe they are not taking strong actions, but still at least they are looking at it. But in India, still it's in a consideration phase. So how do you think the CFOs, individual companies, CFOs, financial executives should look at these aspects? Or because ultimately they will do it only when the government comes with some regulations or regulator asks them, for example, RBI asks them for some sustainable finance or green finance, then perhaps banks will do it. But that's another side of it. How do you think companies on their own should do something related to this topic?
Well, I think that these CFOs and such are pretty smart, and so are the corporate guys. They realize that most of it is just talk, that even the stuff that they're talking about that will help in climate change is a bunch of nonsense. It's not going to do anything. There's two parts to of climate change that's coming. One is obviously that pollution is causing it. So pollution, we knew before the word climate change came into our vocabulary that pollution is bad. You know, air and water, those are the two big things. So obviously any pollution is going to affect healthcare. It's going to be bad for the environment, and we should definitely look at that. But the part that you have to remember about climate change, which nobody's looking at, climate change is not a rowboat. It doesn't, you don't say, oh, well, let's turn it around now, right? It's more like a battleship that, or aircraft carrier. It takes miles before it starts turning. And in my view, the thing to do is to prepare for climate change. It's actually a little late. Now, we should obviously do things which reduce pollution, which is good for us. However, if you're thinking that you're going to reverse this trend of climate change, it's nonsense, right? So what you really have to do is look at, okay, climate change is coming. It's like an army that's coming against you. And you're saying, okay, I have time to prepare a little bit. What do I do? Start building the fortresses now. Don't wait till they're 100 yards from you, because then it's too late. So I looked at it and I said, what's going to happen? What's climate change going to do?
Right.
And can I come up with a solution for that? Right? Because it's coming. You can't prevent it. Right? It's already here. I mean, you can't prevent something that's already here. Right? And the biggest issue that we found has been water. Right? Water is worldwide. It's going to a lot of places don't have water. The water is getting polluted. It's both climate change and population growth, but climate change is making the oceans rise, and therefore you have contamination throughout the coastal areas, right? Which again, water. So what we've done is say we spent 10 years figuring this out. So okay, we figured out that the water is really the big issue, not electricity, it's water. And so we've started inventing things that, what can we do worldwide that would solve this problem? So actually we're right now, we're just about in production for a unit that will solve this problem worldwide. We have a unit that's the size of a dishwasher. And what it does is it goes to, so you can have one of them, or you can have 1,000 of them, it's like a server farm, right? So you can have one server, or you can have 1,000 servers. And it can, India's one of the biggest problems is water. So that whole belt, which is a high population belt, the UP belt, which is all brackish water, all the way from UP all the way to Rajasthan, Haryana, have something that will make that into as good as bottled water, right? For really, really very little. Basically, it can be done on solar. It's so little in terms of energy requirement. So I think that water is the biggest thing. Now, I also think I'm too early. I think people won't realize that water is the big thing for another 10 to 20 years. Okay. And then they'll be panicked because there's no water. Already in lots of parts of India where the rich don't live, the water is a huge problem, right? As you know, news is only for the rich. If a rich guy dies, news everywhere, 1,000 poor guys died, and nobody really pays attention. It's not news. But the problem is already at the poor, but it's going to get to more and more of the rich. And now also, of course, water is health. So if you're not having good water, you are going to get sick. But it's interesting. I thought that would be more in India and so on. But it turns out there is no clean water in the United States either.
How can, the leaders from all over the world, because this is not just a problem for one country, it's a problem for the whole world. Do you think, because you have been doing a great research on this topic, how can the leaders from all over the world, or the policymakers come together and maybe solve this issue? Is there a solution to this? That is also the first question. And what could be the way, to find out some solution to this?
The solution isn't, we have come up with it. I think we'll install in the next 30 years. It'll probably be really big after I'm dead. But what we've created is a solution for basically worldwide to implement that everywhere. I mean, you have water pollution coming out of factories. You can actually recycle that water. So I don't believe that your audience really will acknowledge that the water is the issue. It'll take a long time, but that's okay. I think that the problem is coming, and we only acknowledge water problem when we turn the tap on and nothing comes out,
Right.
or we have water that's not drinkable, or there's no farming going on. So it is too early, and what everybody's concentrated on in climate change is pollution, which is I don't think they use the word pollution anymore. Everything is climate change and gases and so on. It's the same thing with a different word.
Okay.
Popular now.
True. So yes, I mean, let's hope that everybody will acknowledge the fact, and maybe they will work on it. But along with the water, what are the other key things, other key areas that you are working on right now?
I think the other thing I was working on is that, in a way, it's fundamental, which was providing a certain amount of electricity to every home, right? People go and say, well, we'll give you education. Well, without electricity, education is really difficult. And here's why. Throughout even this country, they say, oh, we'll go to India and be internet everywhere. Okay. Now, how are you going to have internet where they have no electricity?
Right.
You can't have that. So we did create a box about this size that every household in India could have one, and they could charge their cell phone, they could be on the internet, which is basically the foundation of education anymore. If you can get on the internet, I mean, we did that in the school where the school was so poor, it didn't have books, it just had a tin roof, blackboard, and chalk. That was the entire thing. And we gave them this and a TV screen. And we came back 6 months later, everybody was on the internet. It went from chalkboard to internet.
Right.
So that's the other issue, is if you want to get education everywhere, it's first electricity, then the internet, which internet we've done in India, done an awesome job, really amazing job.
Yeah.
But the electricity part is having a pole, 60 yards away from your village is not it. You have to actually have it in each household. And that's never going to happen in India by wires. Because you have to remember, one of the things is they're poor. Well, obviously, then they can't afford electricity. So all their best they can do is steal it, right? Or you give them something that doesn't require any bill whatsoever. So I think education, but then fundamental of education is electricity. So some sort of power to every house is probably the next biggest thing. And these are fundamental. You have to remember, water is also health. Otherwise you can drink brackish water. You can khara pani. You can drink that, but you'll die, right? But so it's really about healthcare, health, and having ability to make money to survive. And so electricity does that in a lot of ways. If you have a little bit of electric, have a light bulb. I mean, look, all your audience is going to be rich people. So can you imagine at every day at 6 p.m., you just sit in the dark. You have no light.
Yeah.
You can't imagine that, right? How productive are you if you're going to just from 6 to 9 be able to do nothing? And so I think electricity is the next, that what we call the power pack. That's the next big thing.
Right. Yes, I think very important anecdotes. In fact, the areas specifically in India where there is electricity, there is a load shedding and the lights are off most of the time. So even that is also the problem. And there are obviously areas where there is no electricity at all. So yes, I think that is also, I think you mentioned a very important point. I would also like you to tell me more about on the policy side. Most of the times, the CFOs or the leaders, specifically talk about major challenges when they deal with the policymakers and the government. You have been doing such an interesting work in this area. How could you do it? How has been the support from the government? What are the challenges that you faced while working with the policymakers? And more importantly, how did you resolve?
Well, we realized that especially in India, the government is in everything. You can't avoid them. And if you try to do something outside of them, someone will stop you. So that's a gift. What we've done, of course, is make relationships with one of our main states that we've done is in Uttarakhand. So what we are is say, look, if you ever need help, we're here, right? It turns out there's a lot of projects that the chief minister of any state wants to do, right? But there's no budget. In other words, it's really interesting. You can have a budget of something in some area of 1,000 crores, and he needs something that costs 5 lakhs, and he can't do it because he can't take that money and put it in something that costs 5 to 10 lakhs. So he's really relatively powerless to do the projects that he wants to do. So what we've told the government is say, look, guys, we're here. If the project makes sense to us, we'll fund it. And that creates a lot more goodwill than because every chief minister has projects that he'd like to do. He has constituents that want like a clinic in some place or some small things everywhere. And we have found that working with them and doing those things, which, and if they want something good, why would we not? Why would we say no? So that at that level, to work with the chief minister is really relatively easy. The next level down, that I don't have an answer to, and which is the bureaucrats. The bureaucrats are going to end up destroying the place, which they really held everything back. So the bureaucrats are tough to deal with, and I don't know any way that you can get past the politicians are not that big a deal. Because they want to serve the constituents so they can get elected. Okay, makes sense. The bureaucrats, on the other hand, is something you guys are much more, you'll know much more about it than I will, so I'll stay quiet on that subject.
Very realistic thoughts, and it's difficult to accept, but yes, that's the truth. And with this, I will take one more, maybe a last, and very important questions. Since you came with the 5R energy idea, I would like you to give this 5R energy thought for our viewers, readers, CFOs, and all the financial professionals who are part of ETCFO and the Economic Times Group. We are just coming out of pandemic, and we have big hope from the 2021. So, what is that 5R energy thought that you would like to instill into the financial leaders?
Look, I don't have any. I can only tell you what we do and how we deal with everything. And how I see in a lot of, especially at least in the United States, the corporate guys deal with stuff, which is really different. We deal everything with common sense. In other words, if it was you that was being affected, how would you deal with it? And there's a lot of pressure among executives to do what's popular, to do what everybody else is doing, to learn from the United States or the schools of the United States or from schools, period. What we do is say, look, common sense is smarter 80 to 90% of the time. Experts are usually wrong. So, I always say that experts know what was, they don't know what will be, right? They're experts on what was. So, which is not that useful. So to me, if you rely on common sense and say, there was a great quote from, I saw this small snippet of the head of Brazil at one point. It was the head of state of Brazil, and he had education in like 3rd grade or 4th grade, whatever. That was it. And they asked him, "How did you fix this thing? How did you make all these amazing things happen?" And he looked at him and he said, "I just did what was obvious." And it was the greatest statement I've seen, because we tend to not do that which is obvious, but tend to do that which is fashionable. So that's it.
Very interesting. Wish I could have more time and I could have taken more questions with you, but it was really meaningful talking to you. It was really meaningful listening to you. Thank you so much for sharing great thoughts at ETCFO Leadership Summit. I'm so sure that the delegates and the viewers will enjoy your views. Thank you so much for being part of ETCFO Leadership Summit. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.